a restaurant team is like a football team. You cannot have just what I call them Formula One waiters, the celebrities.
There's a few things you can get done through digital trainings, and you should get done because, you have to do it fast and it has to come in a structured format.
Welcome to another episode of Supy Talks. We have two industry captains here with us, going to talk about their great experience in the hospitality industry. First of all, we have Janos with us, who is a tech founder who actually started a company out of his own frustration with hospitality, out of a need that he saw. But before that, he had some really good senior positions in very good brands such as COYA and La Petite Maison here in Dubai. Next, we have Yann, who also has a really lengthy and very experienced career in hospitality, has worked with very nice brands such as Atelier Rebouchon, has worked with Nobu, where he even became the youngest GM in London at the age of 27. Very accomplished man in the hospitality industry. And he's also been nicknamed as the champion of openings. So let's start with you, Yann. You're the champion of openings. Tell us more about that.
Well, I don't know about champion. I got into openings more by default than anything else. You do one, then you do two. The things of opening, it becomes addictive, really addictive.
Why is that?
The adrenaline. Depending on the character you are, the adrenaline.
You like the chaos.
You like the chaos. You like the problem-solving situation where you have to think of your feet. I've described myself on one stage, actually, quite early on. I described myself as an opening junkie. Like I was almost looking for the next shot.
You've done more than 50 of them, so...
Yeah, more or less 45 to 50, probably, if you look at all the individual outlets. Because some are hotels where you have 2 or 3 outlets. Lately, when I worked in Saudi Arabia, I also did a lot of pop-ups, which is also a different way of doing it, but it's still an opening.
And typically, most openings are always delayed because people always think that they're easy to do, but then they're always, beyond schedule, beyond budget as well. But you've actually managed to open Atelier Rebouchon a month ahead of schedule.
Yeah, well, that's my only one.
Only one.
That's my only one, and I think that will be my only claim to fame in terms of, if I'm honest, because if you sit here and say everything is on time, blah blah blah, my only one, l'Atelier Rebouchon in London, was ready and delivered a month ahead of schedule, which is a bit of a dream situation because then it gives you time to set up plenty of things. It gives time to the team to settle, and actually, it's the only opening where the line staff came in and the restaurant was actually set up. And I'm not just talking about tables and chairs, I'm talking about glassware, silverware, stations in place. So the only thing we had to concentrate on for 3 weeks was literally getting familiar with the place, where is what, and training.
That's very interesting.
But I'm not sure I'm eligible to ask questions, but how is that possible?
I don't know. It happened. It happened. The designer was amazing. With Jean-Yves Rochon, which was the designer for Joël Robuchon. We just so happened we had no issue with funding, which, as you know, sometimes, even though investors are serious and they have the funding, but sometimes it's about getting it together at the right time. We had no issue with long lead item, which is also a big thing, especially in design. When you work with people like Mr. Jean-Yves Rochon, who's been also the designer for Four Seasons worldwide, he uses materials very specific. He uses suppliers very specific, so there's time delay. But I think one of the things is because he worked with Joël for so long, he knows Joël by heart.
Anticipation.
Anticipation. We had no issue with any of that. And that we like it or not, is always as we say in French. C'est le guerre de la le nerf de la guerre, which is the fundings. If the fundings are in place, the cash is actually available. It makes things much easier in terms of execution, especially when you're looking at just getting things together, whether it's small suppliers, whether it's the architect fees, whether it's the contractors.
That's very interesting.
But it's the only one. Some of them
out of 50, only one.
Yeah, only one. I mean, some of them, like I have to say also maybe one in Dubai when we did the Earth Cafe, we did it in 3 months, from shell core to opening, which is also extremely fast. But again, I think this is an exception in the sense that all the design is the same design as what we had. We already have 2 or 3 The design, we kept to the same base. We just adapted it to the space. Again, the same designer, so you have a continuity. You have a familiarity with the concept. You know where to get what.
No back and forth thing.
Yeah, you know exactly what thing might give you trouble in terms of design-wise. Like Earth Cafe, we were expecting trouble with some of the tiles who come especially from Mexico, for instance. They're handmade. It so happened that they still had stock.
But yet you did it in 3 months, which is quite impressive.
We did it in 3 months, yes. I mean, I don't like so much to say I did it in 3 months. I think it takes a team of people behind it. Of course, there is a leadership behind it. There's few people are pushing more than others or are more used to it than others. But ultimately, it takes a whole team of people to achieve something like that.
That's impressive.
Right.
Janos, what's your experience with openings? Are they usually on time or not?
Almost never. So I think one in 50 is actually not a bad percentage. Though I was quite lucky because I work for some really good organizations where, we had dedicated people on purchasing and ordering and, a lot of different things. So I think I opened 9 or 10 restaurants globally. Almost always we were late. However, we've been late like literally from a couple of days to a couple of weeks. So never really late. So I never had an opening where we had to, fire the staff and rehire them again in 2 months time, which you might hear from other operators. So I think being late is a normal thing, but most of the times we were, late just a couple of days, which I think is pretty decent when, you're thinking about building a restaurant from scratch and then, getting all the suppliers right and, get the kitchen in place, start to cook, hire the team and everything. So, I opened a couple. To be honest with you, opening it was always the favorite part of my job. Even though I was a corporate training manager, I was more of an operation manager in retrospect. While I was in charge of training, I was looking after a lot of other things, and I think this is the one of the best time in a restaurant. With the staff, we used to call it the honeymoon period of a restaurant. So everybody's still happy, especially the staff. The management obviously sorting a lot of things out and building a restaurant. But in general, the staff is happy. They can come in their own clothes. You can have your coffee. You study, you mingle around, you do your stuff. So everybody's still happy. So I think I always considered pre-openings a very important part. Of a restaurant life. You are really setting the tone.
That's where you build the culture as well.
You build the culture, you're setting the tone, you are building up your relationships when you are rushing this period or, very often, I'm sure you agree, you always plan on a couple of weeks of soft opening and then you're ending up doing 2 or 3 days maximum. That's mistake.
That's good to have 3 days sometimes.
Yeah. Which is usually, setting up a very, very, very rushy operation and not setting things properly. So I think, pre-opening is an amazing part of every restaurant life. Of course, is also the most stressful. So, when I used to go to open a restaurant, I knew that, okay, 2 months, 3 months, no day off. You're catching hours of sleep in the afternoons when you manage to escape from work. But it is, as beautiful it is as stressful.
And Janos, tell us a bit more about your experience at COYA, where you were in charge of all the training of all the employees globally. That must have been quite a role. How was that?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. Actually, I created this position for myself.
Those are the best ones.
Yeah. One day I realized that, the day what I thought never will come, it came. I burnt out from operation. I really needed a break, and I didn't see any other way that I have resigned from my job to my boss. But while I slid my resignation letter, I also gave him a chance to rehire me as a training manager. So training is something I've always been passionate about, and I thought that I don't want to do operation and 3 and 4 o'clock closings anymore. I could still impact the business through a different level of training that I used to do in a restaurant. So I gave him a job description. So I don't want to say in a podcast his first reaction, but it was not nice words. He was not really happy to hear this. But essentially he said, listen, I don't trust this BS position, but I trust you, so you get a shot. It took them a couple of months by the time they actually gave me the shot. It was still back and forth. Why don't you try this halftime, that? But I was standing firm, and I said, you know what, I really believe I can impact the business. And then after that, I get the chance, I could show up some visible results. So after the first year, our average check went up 12% the first year, which, considering the 5 years of lifespan of a restaurant have never happened. Our staff turnover rate went down. So suddenly they offered me a global position. They realized, actually, you know what, there is a possibility that actually this can work. Obviously, if somebody is fully focusing on that. So that was also a great time because the company got invested or acquired by another group. And then we suddenly started to open. So they needed exactly somebody like me who, know the brand DNA, used to be a manager of the company. So they needed kind of, somebody like me to go and open a restaurant and train employees. We used to open 2-3 restaurants a year, which is for a style of restaurant like COYA, where it's not only food, but it's a huge bar program. It's a lifestyle brand, music, art, members club. We were like as complex as it gets. So yeah, I naturally grew into a corporate training manager position, which I really enjoy to do, and I was doing this for quite a few years. Yeah, and actually, this is where most of my openings are coming from.
That's quite impressive, and I can imagine, like, as you're scaling a restaurant, because we talked about opening the first restaurant, but then when you're creating a brand and you're scaling that and you're trying to keep that consistency. For example, you have a Nobu in London and there's a Nobu here in Dubai, for example. Like, how do you? What's your take, Yann, on like how to keep it consistent, how to keep the soul itself? While opening in completely different geographies with different market dynamics, etc.
Well, I think it becomes tricky because the success of the first restaurant is usually down to the team itself. Depending on the strength of the team you have, on the dedication of the team that is in place. So duplicating that is always very tricky, and especially at a level like places like Nobu, and I'm sure COYA is the same case scenario. I think there has to be a really big focus on the back of house team. What I call the back of house is everything to do with, as Janos said earlier, even designer, architect, accounting people, procurement, and everybody's on the same line. Is to recreate the DNA is difficult because also every country has a different aspect. So you will have to, whether you like it or not, you'll have the base training for sure. You have, your staples and you have your rules and regulations, and but then you will adapt probably some of them with the DNA of the country itself, because different country means different clientele behavior as well. That's a big part of it. That's really tricky, actually. So hopefully you try to have some homegrown people that you move over to the next place. So you bring with you the DNA, but you have to do it in such a way that you don't want to strip the first one from all your weapon, if I mean, it's, if you take everybody out to the next place, then your first place will not. So you have to, it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act. The good thing, when you have an existing place, you can always use it as a training ground.
So you send people over.
So you will send few people over, so they get impregnated with the DNA. They understand the place is working. They see the product, and even indirectly, even if they don't work, or if you don't make them learn things deeply by being exposed to it on a daily basis for a period of time, they obviously absorb lots of it.
Yeah.
And then you move on to the next one, then you move to the next one. So, and then you become a certain, I'm a firm believer that when you become a certain size, you create actually an opening team.
Okay.
Who just specialize in opening and then specialize in following up and go around to make sure they check standard, to make sure they check this, because then you develop an eye for detail when you do that all the time. You can't just pick somebody out and say, okay, go there and go and see what's wrong. Because a lot of the time when you do that, it comes across quite negatively and not very constructive to the existing team. So if you have people who are used to move around, first of all, they're used to the traveling, which is not an easy thing to do. It sounds very glamorous to travel. But trust me, when you live out of suitcase, and I've done it for a long time, you go there for 2-3 weeks. Okay, the first couple of times, especially when you're younger, you feel like you're the king of the world. Yes, I'm the businessman of restaurant business. I stay in 5-star hotel, but very quickly you get tired of it. Because you're losing You're losing your repair at home. You're losing home. Even the picture. You haven't got a picture in the room.
100%.
So it's a bit difficult. But I believe you have to have a special team who just does opening eventually.
That makes a lot of sense.
And you have a structure. Actually, this is what we did with Earth Cafe. Not an opening team as such, but we created eventually a strong management team and structure. And then we went from 1 to 12 or 13 operations in 5 years.
That's impressive.
The advantage of it is 90% of it was in Saudi Arabia. And at the time, only one was outside Saudi Arabia, which makes things slightly easier. And actually, the one in Dubai was extremely challenging at first.
Why is that?
Because as a group, sometimes you want to do things remotely, and you think, I'm going to go there once a month, and it's going to be fine. But then they quickly realize that when you expand, you need to have your boots. You have boots on the ground.
Hospitality is a human business.
Absolutely.
You have to have boots on the ground. You have to have presence again, who reassure the DNA of the concept of the brand, the DNA that you put together, that you want to make sure everybody has. So you have to have dedication and have somebody
and
there
you have
all
to
the
leave
time.
enough DNA behind to run itself, because as soon as you step out, it's not running the same way usually. We had the exact same thing. we had a team of opening team members. We were going to open, and when we were not opening, we were visiting the venues, to check how things are going. But, when you come, everything is always shining in front of you because they know you're coming. But as soon as you step out, it's not going exactly the same way. And then, as you said, I think, traveling, I feel that I used to travel like 10 months a year. I had a flat in Dubai, but, it was basically for nothing. I was living out of the
when you
suitcase.
come home, you feel like you're going to the hotel.
Yeah.
You say, oh,
You had to clean the AC. You had to, full maintenance needed in the flat because you were just simply not there.
But for me, this is the technicality for the overall organization of the restaurant in terms when you develop and when you go 1, 2, 3, 4 sites for one brand. And the other side and the other aspect of it was very complicated. Is the product itself. And in those days, it's something that Nobu's done very, very well. Nobu has a very canning concept. He's been very clever with all his food. All his food are worked out to the T in terms of recipes and ingredients. To a T. A teaspoon of this, everybody knows what it is. And because Japanese base is quite simple. There's not a lot of complicated sauces and stuff like you have maybe the French cooking or so on and so forth. But one thing is done very well. He really quickly identified the product he wanted to work with and made sure to get the consistency, those main products are available in the countries he goes to.
Would that mean having the exact same ingredients, no matter
Not only
the country?
the ingredients, the exact brand.
The exact brands.
So obviously the fresh product, vegetable and stuff, you need to go and see what you find. And you got some people who import from Europe or whatever. So then you have a comfortability in terms of the protein is the same thing. Some countries are stronger than others. But as a whole, when you come into what I call a broken market with already other places existing, you find your protein. Where it becomes tricky is all to do with the dry, what we call the dry good, which is could be the salt, could be the pepper, could be a certain spice, could be, in the case of Nobu, a special rice that he uses for his sushi, for instance. So as a consistency, you make sure that you use the same rice everywhere. So he has no surprise of consistency from one side to the other. Okay, that's one of the things that I think made it successful at the time.
That's impressive.
And actually today, when we're opening or when I'm involved with a new opening, for instance, even if it's AYZ concept, doesn't matter who it is. One of the first things I ask the brand chef is send me a market list and highlight the must-have on the market list to make sure if it's a country and having worked in Saudi Arabia 10 years ago when the market wasn't there. At first, we had a lot of issues because the import line wasn't there. There's a lot of product that wasn't available.
You would have to create your own.
Yeah, we had to
Make
create
deals
our
with
own,
suppliers.
and then you have to create, to find a way to import those products, and there's legislation and so on and so forth. So, but that's one of the first thing I will always ask a brand chef: what are the must? What are the ingredients you will not do without in order to respect your concept in terms of food quality and flavors?
Would that become a deal breaker for deciding to not open the restaurant in a certain
It could
geography?
be originally. It could be on some cases. I mean, usually, unfortunately, those questions happen once the deal has been signed. So it's very difficult to have a deal breaker. Then it's more, it gives you more headache, and then they come and they say, if you don't get this, I'm not going to open. All right, then you have to find a way. But that's human nature. I think the human nature, especially when you work in operations like Yannis and myself or whatever, is operation, you become a problem solver, right? Sometimes part of the excitement and part of the challenge is to make something happen that's not supposed to happen.
No. Find
You'll
a
find a way.
workaround.
Lately when we opened Mr. Chow in Saudi Arabia, it took us 1 year, to get the authorization to import the duck, because Mr. Chow works with a specific duck from Ireland to get it attested, to get it through the government, to get it imported. 1 full year.
And they would not compromise on having another type of duck. It had to be that specific.
No, I mean,
one.
obviously, full well that when you come down to the opening time, if you don't have the damn duck, sorry, my French, when you have the duck, he will probably compromise, but they won't be happy with it. And they're such a professional, and Mr. Chow himself, they won't let go until you get the duck. So, bottom line, you will sort it out. But it took us a year. We got it done with the procurement guy. He got it done just maybe a couple of weeks before we opened.
That's the right way.
That's what operation people do. We don't let go.
The question is always, can you afford it time-wise, money-wise? You're supposed to open.
So on a different topic, so the procurement is one, but also to keep that consistency is obviously, we talked a bit about staff training. And it is from that problem statement of like having that consistent training across different geographies that you, Janos, you actually created a tech platform to help hospitality operators, especially in the fine dining industry, to help them standardize and to simplify their training. Tell us more about that. Like, how did Pocket Trainer come to exist?
This is a story actually I tell everybody. First thing, usually I tell somebody on a meeting that I actually never planned to do this. I had no intention of creating a business whatsoever out of this. It was more to my pure frustration, because back then when I started my role, I thought that, we are now opening new businesses. My first job is to really get every single venue on the same standards, because, I think international brands that are expanding, they know this very well, that you have same looking venues, the food is very similar, though it can fluctuate. 20% of the dishes might be unique to the local market. However, the brand standards very often are different. Basic stuff: where do you put the glass, how do you serve a coffee, what are the cutlery that you're serving with certain dishes are different, right? So my first job was to create such a strong brand standard that everybody could follow. And that was, basically coming down to designing good looking training materials. And I'm the kind of person, I don't like to do things the halfway. So I said, we are going to create the best looking training materials that are out there on the market. So when our first training manuals came out, one for each department, they were 100, 120 pages, National Geographic style, magazines, beautiful roadmaps, purpose map. You do this day 1, day 2. They just look stunning. There was only one problem with it. Nobody ever read them. At some point, I was getting really frustrated, but then I came down to, human level, and I just simply asked my guys, like, listen, explain this to me. What is wrong? Why, you never seen training materials like this. Why don't you guys learn from them? Why don't you guys use them? And they were just, very honest. They said, listen, it's not fitting in my pockets. Where do I carry this book? And on the other hand, we are millennials. They showed me the phone. They said, this is where we're learning from.
Practicality and
so,
time.
I had to realize very quickly that we did all this amazing job for almost absolutely nothing. And I had to think, I could do two things. I could get really upset, and like many managers would do this. Yeah, but I did my job, and look, and then I'm forcing the employees. So I actually very quickly pivoted. I said, you know what, we need to change direction. We have to put this in a different format. The problem is not the training content. The problem is the format. It was not user friendly. So back then, there was a time when QR code menu was just coming in. That was a new thing, QR code menu. So there was a guy designing us our QR code menu, and then when I looked at it, I said, you know what? This actually almost looks like a training material, the menu, but it's just not detailed enough. Could we do another version which, look like our menu, but I could add more details? And I said, yeah, we can try. So basically, without budget, without anything, I started to develop with this guy a training platform. And this was evolving. That was, again, the time when we already had like 8 venues globally. And I had massive problems with updating all the food Bibles and everything. I mean, imagine we had a beautiful book of our 120 dishes, 50-page, 60-page pages book, and then one ingredient changes or one allergy forgotten, you update it. You have to go PowerPoint, print, and then you print one page.
And communication.
And the communication. What do you do with this piece of paper? They can't put it in the existing book. It goes in a pocket, it goes in a locker, it gets lost. So I had massive problems. And then suddenly I realized, hold on a minute, if we have a digital platform, I can just update things from my mobile. It became much easier. Training became available and always updated. So out of a side project, essentially, I realized very quickly that, actually there is a big potential here. I think the industry needs something like that. And of course, I looked around on the market. I didn't really find anything similar. There were companies who were creating generic training content, but I never believed really in generic content. So after a couple of years, I said, you know what? I could probably do this for the whole industry. And then basically the idea from here developed slowly. And then from one day to another, an investor found me, money was put on the table. So it really happened organically. I never really planned to launch this business, especially this fast. But from day one, we had traction. We had companies contacting us. We heard about it. They wanted to have something easy to use, good looking, made for the millennials, made for the Gen Zs. So basically, we found product market fit very, very quickly. And then we expanded into a couple of countries, landing some really decent businesses from the beginning. And that really helped. So basically, the whole thing happened very organically. It was never really planned to be the business, but essentially, it turned out this way.
That's beautiful. And, Jan, what's your approach to training in general?
Well, now sometimes I'm trying to use Yannis one. I've came across, he presented to me a while ago, and I have to say he was really impressive in terms of very, very easy to understand, very easy to apply, or whatever. But my approach of training is being slightly older in the bunch is the more traditional one. I mean, today I don't do training myself. Even though when I do, I enjoy doing it. First of all, I think one thing about trainers people need to understand is not given to everybody to be a trainer. A lot of people, they give position of a trainee manager or trainee this, but it really takes a certain skill of communication to train. There's a certain patience, there's a certain way of approaching the training to be able to get through those guys. You have to find what tickles them, because when you have like 20, 30 or 40 guys in a room and you do a training for 3 or 4 hours, you have to keep them animated. It takes a lot of skill to be a real trainer.
And people have short attention span these days.
Very short attention span. There's some tricks. And, I always say, is one training that I've done myself as being trained that I will remember today is called the trainer's trainer. I don't know if you probably came across that.
Yeah, I did that, yeah.
I did that when I was part of the opening team for the Lanesborough Hotel in London. To this day, and we opened the Lanesborough in 1991, 1992. To this day, is the only training I was trained on that I remember.
Why?
Because the way it was done, because at the time the company was American, and I think at the time also being from Europe, you have somebody coming from America, there used to be the stigma, the big American is coming to train you.
It's a big stigma.
And you have to say, especially in those days.
And Americans are good at that. They were always ahead of these kind of things,
Yeah. I mean, today you can debate it, and we're not going to go into, philosophy, politics, or whatever. But if you stick it to the ground, especially in those days, they have something about entertainment, those guys. It's all about a show most of the time. And that trainer was unbelievable.
They can talk, they have a presence, they look like $1 million,
and they give you a couple of tricks. I mean, I still have, I think, the manual somewhere in my files at home, okay? And I remember clearly there's a couple of spots that they give you that you keep using. Little momentum that you use, even when we do a pre-meal briefing. You start by this, you put this in the middle, at the end you always finish by something positive.
The burger technique, yeah.
And then you warm up to it or not, but that's something I really warmed up to it. So training is a really difficult thing. You have to be very patient. You have to also understand that you need to give your trainees the benefit of the doubt. You can't, I've never been from the school where you do as I say right now. If you don't do it, you're in trouble. I don't think you can have that attitude.
You have to make them see the benefits.
Yeah, I mean, see the benefit. Some of them and again, I think we talked about it a while ago, but it's the art of management. Art of management is managing people. So whatever system you have in your mind that you want to apply to your team, you know full well that you're going to have to adapt it, because in the restaurant business or even catering business as a whole, there's so many different people in terms of nationality, in terms of culture, in terms of background, come from so many different places. It's not, one stop, one shop. You have to adapt whatever system you have to an individual. It's like being in a classroom again. It's like being a great teacher. He will be able to isolate the kid in the room who needs slightly more attention. He will isolate the kid in the room who is slightly easier on this, but that guy can also help you to help the other guy there. So maybe you even change the guy the way he sits in the room. Or, hey, don't sit here, sit next to this guy. And you build relationship with it as well. So it's a very, very tricky thing to train.
So I guess this is what Pocket Trainer also helps with a lot, because your goal is to standardize training, but at the same time, you can still customize it as per certain use cases.
See, I very often speak actually almost against my products, but I always thought that, what we do is a tool. I don't think that training can be fully digitalized or should be fully digitalized, because there are many things that has to be learned on the job from people, But I always say that there are many things that are absolutely no point to waste time on training through class trainings. And you cannot even afford it in an operation. Training is something that everybody wants to do, but very few can. It's not that they don't want to, it's that they don't have the time, the resources, the right person, and many other million things. So I think training, especially in the beginning, through a digital platform is very smart, because you can tell people, hey, listen, just join the company. We have a couple of courses on the company's background, on the founders, on the food, so there's a few things you can get done through digital trainings, and you should get done, because you have to do it fast, and it has to come in a structured format, rather than finding the just available head waiter who has a bit of time to explain you the concept. So I think there is a lot of things you can do digitally, and you should do digitally, but you should never think that, okay, now we bought a platform and now the training is done there. We don't have to train employees. We're not taking the job of the manager or even the training manager. We're not taking a job away from a training manager or from the restaurant manager. We are helping to do it faster and smarter, so they can spend that time on something more important, sorting stuff out, spending time with the guests, spending time with the waiters or your staff members. So I'm totally with him. I used to do trainings for many years. I didn't start with an app when I was a trainer. I was literally in front of people learning the trade, while looking at some of my waiters who were better trainer than me, and this is something I always say, that I learned this because I'm a guy with I can get into things, and I study how to do things right, and I was doing my job, but I was never exceptional. I always agree. I always acknowledge that I had guys doing better training than me, and I was envy them, but few people just better than others than doing training. Exactly as I said, it's either something you're born with or don't. You can learn it, you can study it, you can watch all the YouTube videos or learn the books if your personality or is not exactly that. So, I was always better at organization and coming up with new things and inventing things and, basically thinking from the strategic point of view rather than executing necessarily. So for me, this app was, a very straightforward thing to do, because this is how I could maximize my knowledge better. But as Yann says, I think especially in hospitality, there is no way that one day training going to be fully digital. And it shouldn't be. It really shouldn't, because at the end of the day, this is a hard job. Most people who never worked in restaurant, they have absolutely no idea how difficult this job is. It doesn't matter your position. You can be a chef or a waiter. It's just a difficult job, hours on your legs, stress from the guests, from the management, from your colleagues. It's just a lot of different things. Plus, you need to know a lot of things. So the best way to learn this is really from people. I think when you respect somebody, when you see somebody doing something exceptionally well, this is how you learn the best. But there are many, many other things that you have to learn, and it could be just a very simple format from your phone, you're sitting on a bus or sitting on a beach or whatever you're sitting, and in just 5 minutes you could learn these things. I totally agree with Yann that I think that the right way to do this is really to blend it, because hospitality in a sense is always going to be old school. We are implementing new things. We are going with the new age things, technology and all that,
It's still a human business.
But it is still a human business.
Yeah, we're people's business at the end of the day, At the end of the day, we all dream sometimes, we all joke about it. Oh, when can I open a restaurant without any staff? Right? Everybody came up with that once or twice because...
You can, but
because it's very...
You don't go out to eat and serve by a robot.
Because the business sometimes is very frustrating. Very, very frustrating in many ways. And, between the team who sometimes are very demanding, between the customer, it's a lot of factors. But equally, I think in training as well, is very important. The digital, because it's great because it's from the day of today. Everybody has digital today. And it's a good reminder, a quick reminder, very easy, very practical. And usually, especially the young generation, if it's not practical, they don't go in there.
Forget it, yeah.
They got other priorities. But it's the old saying, and I'm the old one here, so there is no replacement for experience.
100%.
There's no shortcuts.
And at the end of the day, we all were young at a stage. We all started. We all were full of energy and dreams and what have you. But eventually, we always come to a point to realize there is no substitute for experience.
Because it's also an experience like yours that allows to build a team. And as the next topic I wanted to bring up is, one thing is having well-trained staff, etc., having the right ingredients in place, but how do you build a proper team, taking into account you have different personalities? I think, Janos, you mentioned ones that you can kind of compare to a football team. I mean, you're a football fan, so obviously you make that comparison. But how do you build a proper team? How do you pick the right players to?
Well, we talked about it before, but it's very difficult to pick up the right player. At the end of the day, it's only so much you can have an interview with somebody. You can ask him thousands of questions. Some people interview better than others. Some people on the pre-opening, for instance, they will be shining on exercise. Okay, they're studious. They will learn the menu by heart. You do a menu test. They have 20 out of 20. You questions on anything there, and then you open the restaurant. You put them on the station in the floor, and after you give them 2 tables of 2, and then they completely lost. The timing is not right. They lose their confidence. So it takes time. Number one. Number two, you have to try to highlight the medium team. You don't build a team by yourself. So you have layer, you have hierarchy, and it's important to be able to identify somebody who can support you in the first place, but then support them in between. And you try to create a bond. But again, if you have when you have experience, when you can tell stories, people relate to stories. In terms of experience. It's like your granddad when he used to sit you down and talks to you about something, right? You go, wow. I think it's the same principle. And then we talked earlier about a football team, because I always use that thing as well. For me, a restaurant team is like a football team. You cannot have just what I call them Formula One waiters, the celebrities, that the guy who they can run a station and, they're the king of the castle. If you only have people like this, your team doesn't gel. They will fight against each other. They all want to do the VIPs. They all want the best section. They all want this. They all want that, So you build the team like you would build a football team. You have a couple of 2 or 3 big strikers or people who really influence or personality-wise, and you have the guys who
the machines.
They run the machines. You can put 200 covers on that guy. He will go in, going out. He will never complain. You mix and match. And it takes a while to be a real good team. It takes that's why when you look at places like LPM, when you look at COYA, when you look at even places like back in London, like Scott's, who's been existing for so long, people have to understand how much work has gone behind those to become what they become and to keep the consistency. When you have restaurants who've been open for 40 years, 50 years, like you look at the Cipriani, you cannot have anything else than respect for them.
100%.
You got people in the industry today, they're very keen to criticize everybody. Yeah, let's be more friendly to each other. Let's help each other, because it's such a tough one. And those amazing brands, hats off. Because if it was that easy, every single one of us here, we will own 10 restaurants, we'll be sitting on the beach somewhere sipping cocktails. But we're not.
There's a reason why a majority of restaurants close after a few years. It's much harder than it looks on the outside.
We're not. So it's hard work. There's a lot of hard work. There's an element of luck sometimes, decisions making and so on. But most of all, the only thing I can wish for everybody is to keep the passion.
100%. That's the most important one.
That's the most important thing at the end of the day.
Janos, what is your approach to building a world-class team?
Listen, it is a whole science on its own. When we're talking about building a team, most people would think, okay, you just need to hire smart and say all the cliches. But exactly as Yann said, some people are really good at interviews, and then you don't know what you hire. You can read the references, you can go these people, they can be the friends of the guy. You really don't know. I am also one of those guys that, okay, I have a couple of questions when I hire people. I used to hire a lot of people, but I never really got into the nitty-gritty with them and ask a million questions. All I want to see is how much, on their feet with the answers. Can they answer something on the spot? Are they thinking on their feet? Because that's a very important skill for a line staff, especially for a waiter, for a bartender. They have to think fast. But apart from that, I would look personality. And exactly as Yann said, I think it's important to understand your team. If you have only strikers, that's not a good team, because they might score a lot of goals, but who's going to defend? So, when it comes to especially front of house, like waiters and runners and all that, you need to understand how many hard workers you have, those guys that can handle big sections, big stress, and how many are with the personality. The guys with, capability to handle big sections, I usually don't have the most outcoming personalities. The guests will never remember them, right? They will make no mistake. They will handle when you have 200, 300 covers a night, but the guests will never remember them. Is it okay to have only these guys? Not really, because you want a couple of waiters who is actually bringing the guests back, who is going to make the guests spend more, So you have to really think strategically, but how many waiter I can afford like that? Because these guys with a personality, they can't handle a big section. So now you finally suddenly, find yourself in a dilemma. Okay, so, we had a busy night. How do we do this? Which waiter goes in this section? This guy is leaving. I should hire probably a similar personality, because we now need a replacement for the personality, not for a waiter position. You can hire waiters or bartenders or chefs, but what is the kind of personality that actually the team right now? If these couple of guys left because there was too much personality in the team, maybe it's time to take somebody slightly different, because we already have now a couple of big personality. Finally, we don't need it for now. We have only 2 or 1. It's enough. So you need to understand your team. You need to go with your gut feeling, and then you have to accept that you will make mistakes, because you don't know who you choose, to be honest with you. Whoever says, I'm good at hiring, I think you're just lucky very often. because you don't know who you hire. And then time will show, because there are many also who is a really good employee, a good soldier, but then they do an ordinary mistake or like a huge mistake in a very short amount of time. So you have to fire them. So you never really know. So I think it just, again, as I said, if you're passionate about this and then you pass this passion and you actually have the sense of people, that's another skill. How do you feel people? How do you read them? How's your gut feeling actually working with people? Not everybody have that, especially nowadays where, I'm coming from the ages where I was hiring my waiters. If we were short on staff, we had to go out to restaurants, to approach people on LinkedIn when this time came. But I had to hire. I had no HR manager hiring people. Nowadays, somebody hires who never been in a restaurant. Their job is to hire and come up with all the smart interview questions. I'm not so sure that's the right way. Also, because when you hire somebody, you feel more ownership over this guy. You don't want this guy to fail because your other manager is going to laugh at you. You pick the guy. Nowadays, what I see very often, that the management is keep blaming HR. But you guys are hired bad stuff. You guys hired. Who did you hire, my friend?
There's all say.
It's so easy to say it's a best stuff the HR team hired. But who did you hire? Trust me, if you hire somebody, you would look after much better. Maybe you didn't look after this guy because from day on you thought, I didn't hire this guy. Somebody sent this guy. Who is this guy? When you hire somebody, you're making sure that on his first day you are working, for example. You give him a tour. While you are setting this guy up for success, you are also don't want to embarrass yourself because this is your guy. You hire this guy. So I think nowadays is a skill that is going out of the skill set of the management team. But yeah, it is just a whole other topic to build a good team. It's sometimes luck, but it's also sometimes.
We used to say, "Is no bad trainer. Is no bad trainee. Is bad trainers."
It's correct.
It's very well said.
It's always the management.
People are very quick to say the guy is not capable.
It's always the management. If a restaurant is not working, it's not the design, it's not the staff, it's the management. It's always the management.
100% makes sense. I have a few final questions for you guys to wrap up this podcast. Yann, I'm going to start with you. What's the biggest mistake you've made in your long career?
Wow.
Thanks God you didn't ask me. You're not going to ask me, right?
Wow.
I'm going to ask the same to you. But I know the answer already.
The biggest mistake, I don't know if it's a mistake, but maybe at some point in my career is to be a little bit too keen on moving on.
You wanted to grow too fast.
Yeah, maybe especially early days, probably, even though I always spend roughly minimum 2 years or 2.5 years or whatever, but I just feel that in a couple of occasions, at a certain point in my career, especially at the beginning, I was very keen on taking the next challenge. And I blame this on maybe, I don't know. Obviously it's your background, it's your growing up process, and there's something in you that you want to prove something. I think this is maybe my biggest mistake, if you call that a mistake, because it's also part of the reason why I've got the experience I have today. So it's a kind of a give and take. If I didn't have that approach, I wouldn't have all the experience I have and maybe all the flexibility I have today. But I still think if it's one thing I will do slightly differently, I will take my time a bit more on a couple of circumstances.
Janos, what's your biggest mistake? Is it the bicycle?
Back then, in my time when I came to Dubai, I was on a final warning after 2 weeks. I almost got fired from LPM. Yeah. People I think are laughing until today on the story. I stole a bicycle. That's what they say. But actually, I just borrowed it.
That's what you say.
That's my side of the story.
We're going to give it back.
But you have to hear both sides of the stories, right?
Exactly.
So nevertheless, in our staff accommodation, we were celebrating the first month. We were just doing like a kind of pre-opening thing. We had a big test. So we were studying for a month, and then we had 100 question questionnaire at the end of the 1 month pre-opening, and I scored 100 points alongside with one of my friends. So I was very happy. I was best, and I was a bit too happy when we came home. And then basically we in our building, there was like a shop, like now in every shop, every building you have a shop downstairs, and then they have this tricycle. So I told the guy, listen, I'm taking the tricycle. So the guy was nodding at me, but it turns out he didn't speak a single word of English, not even a yes or no. So actually then I went to the shop. I came back. The guy was not there already. I took the tricycle. I was playing around, in the hall, and the guys were going up to the lift. So I said, okay, I'm going to come in the lift. So I just come in the lift. We went up, whichever floor we left, and I just left the tricycle there. That's what I did. I took the tricycle, I left it in a building. But the following day, the guy coming to work, one tricycle is missing. Somebody stole it. Who stole it? They called the police. They checked the security camera. What they see, me, is no voice. You can't hear what the discussion. They just see me talking to the guy, and then 5 minutes later, I'm taking the tricycle. So there was a big deal out of it. We had to apologize from the shop and everything. I mean, my general manager, the day after, he's calling me like, can you come into the office? I'm sitting in the security office. They're showing me all the footage, I was like, ask the guy. Anyway, nobody believed me, obviously. Everybody was laughing at me. They had to give me a final warning. But in the meantime, my general manager was pushed around in a trolley across the building as well. So he was laughing on the whole thing. But anyway, they had to give me a final warning. I almost flew home 2 weeks after or months after I came to Dubai. So this is how I started my career in LPM. I always went home.
Well, after that, the only way is up, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, but you know what? I tell you what, that incident took a lot back from me. I actually became much more humbled. I said, actually, I cannot have this, big personality. I have to actually turn my head down, put it into work, put some hard work, and show them that actually I'm not this kind of guy, because I'm really not. On the top of it, I'm very collective when I'm drunk. I don't do stupid stuff, But that incident, straight away set me up, in front of 100 people. They announced it on a briefing. I was just really publicly embarrassed by this, But it helped me, to be honest with you, because I turned my head down and I was just like, bestseller for like 6 months in a row. I was just doing my job, and I got noticed. So I got first promoted. Beside that, I got first promoted to management.
That's
so in a way it helped, but I was a bit of a laughing stock for a few years because of that.
Definitely a cool story to tell to your kids at some point. Maybe not yet. Later on.
Not too early. Not too early.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. It's been lovely speaking with you both. See you guys soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.